I had to put this on because I think this is the jacket I wore on the 12th of April in 2014 when I first interviewed Donald Trump here. At 5 o'clock, the reason I wanted to come tonight, I was in Macomb County, Michigan, last night, home of the Reagan Democrats, which Donald Trump won overwhelmingly to lead us to victory a year ago. But this is actually technically the first anniversary, because it wasn't until 2:30 in the morning on the 9th that Donald Trump was actually named the President-elect of the United States. At 5 or 6 o'clock, Jared and I got the, I think it was 5, 6 o'clock, we got the first exit polls. And they were pretty grim. I think we were even in Iowa and Ohio. We were getting crushed everywhere else, including in New Hampshire. I think they showed us 8 or 10 down. Jared had a recommendation to call Matt Drudge. We called Drudge and he says, "You guys are idiots. It's the corporate media. They're wrong on Trump all the time. You know, don't pay attention to this." At 9:15, the Detroit Free Press called Michigan for Hillary Clinton. At 10:36, AP called Ohio for Donald J. Trump. At 10:50, AP called Florida for Donald Trump. At 11:11, AP called North Carolina for Donald J. Trump. At 12:02, AP called Iowa for Donald J. Trump. And at 12:15, the fake news opposition party, Detroit Free Press, reversed themselves and said the state of Michigan is uncalled. And the reason was the algorithms they use, and the reason the exit polls that showed us early in the evening, tied in Ohio, getting crushed in Florida, getting crushed in North Carolina, and even in Iowa, had never taken into account the small towns and the blue-collar neighborhoods that Donald Trump was rolling up massive victories. At 1:35, they called the state of Pennsylvania, which they said had been the burial ground of Republican aspirations. At 2:29, on the morning of the night, they called Wisconsin. And 1 minute later, they declared Donald Trump President-elect of the United States. Yes. Now, we kind of knew when Michigan got reversed, based upon our models, we were going to win. But it took a couple more hours. Remember that hang fire about Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. And we can debate why AP and the mainstream media wanted Donald Trump to go up at 2:30 in the morning instead of midnight. But I don't want to, cast aspirations on the opposition party. On the 24th at 5:30 in the afternoon, the Detroit Free Press called the state of Michigan for Donald J. Trump. Also on the 24th, I think, if I believe correctly, they called the state of New Hampshire for Hillary Clinton. There's been an election integrity commission run by the Vice President of the United States with Chris Kobach and all types of officials throughout the country that have looked into this situation in New Hampshire. Now, we won 306 electoral votes that night. And 2 individuals turned out to be faithless electors, and so they didn't cast a vote on when the electors were called together, although I always count those. They were ours fair and square. But I think you had same-day registration here of out-of-state, and I want to make sure I get these numbers exactly right. There were 6,540 same-day registers here that had to get a driver's license. They came from with out-of-state driver's license, had to get driver's license by January 7th, 2017. Now, the Election Integrity Commission, on August 30th of 2017, 10 months afterwards, said only 1,014 of the 6,540 registrants had actually obtained a New Hampshire driver's license. The other 5,526 individuals never obtained anything.
Also cost us the Senate.
Okay? Only 230 registered a vehicle. So there's what, 5,313 that we don't know where they are or what they did. Now people have been howling. If you take 1/3 away from said, hey, maybe they made a mistake, maybe their college kids are here, you still got 3,600 votes that really haven't been accounted for. And since Clinton's was 2,700, I believe strongly, and I'm prepared to put money where my mouth is, that we won the state of New Hampshire. Now, I think it's the Secretary of State. He's a Democrat. I heard he's a good man, but we would like to tell him tonight. I talked to Chris Kobach and the guys in the Integrity Commission. Whatever it takes, whatever amount of money it takes, I'll put it up. But we want to find out, and I think the people of New Hampshire deserve to understand what happened on that day. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat, if you're a Clinton supporter or if you're a Trump supporter. You can't play games with that. It's not right. Okay? And it's time we stop this kind of nonsense. It's the kind of thing that have people question our elections overall. If you think you can game the system like that, you can come in a state, register on the same day, vote, you're not even a resident of the state, you go back to your own state. It's the way that if you want to leave, have us lose the understructure of this country, that's the way to do it. So I would greatly advise the Secretary of State, we're going to reach out to him. We'll put up any money that needs to take any amount of time, even to the next election, but we have to find out that number. And I guarantee you, at the end of the day, Donald J. Trump's going to have 310 electoral votes. Now, the reason I wanted to come up here was that I had known now President Trump for a couple of years through Dave Bossie when President Trump had thought about running previously, and we kind of made a presentation. The only time I really met him, he came on our radio show. He was interviewed by the Breitbart group. I saw him at CPAC a number of times. I was blown away by the way he comported himself, and I thought he said something. I thought he had a message that would resonate with people, but I never saw him in front of really activists. On the 12th of April, 2014, in this very room, I got to see Trump with other people who had really worked their entire adult lives to run for President of the United States. And what I do in those situations when I come to these things, and Dave Bossie put these on the first of these cattle calls, just like I did with the president the entire time, just like I did when, like, for instance, we went to Saudi Arabia to Riyadh to give the speech. I always kind of stuck off to the side or step to the back. I'm not really interested in how he's delivering the speech. I can critique that later on videotape. What's most important is to see how the audience responds. And that day was something very different. Donald Trump speaks in a very plain spoken vernacular. Okay, he doesn't speak like a politician, but he connects. And I could see the connection that day. It was a very different speech than the other guys gave, and the other guys they were terrific speakers, and people were very engaged. And this was kind of dedicated grassroots activists. But Trump's speech was very different. As Corey said, he had that rousing finish of Make America Great Again, but it was what he said during the speech about jobs and trade. It's something that Jeff Sessions and myself and others have been working on for a number of years. And that was the kind of Reagan coalition of really working class people, middle class people that came together in the 80s. What had happened to that? Where had that gone? Who spoke to those people? And I was very adamant from day one that places like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan and Iowa and Ohio, places and folks that had President Reagan, that voted for President Reagan, would vote for a conservative candidate that was a populist, an economic nationalist, and spoke to the people's concerns. To tell you about the mainstream media, the place was packed with mainstream media that day, because this was really the first cattle call of the 2016 presidential campaign. And I had a show at Sirius XM, had the Saturday show, they let us broadcast all day long from here. And we had Trump as a guest, and he came over, he gave us, I think, 30 minutes, right? 30 minutes. Because there weren't a lot of other people going to interview him. In fact, I had just had on there a reporter that knew us quite well from one of the most prominent papers in the country. And I said, hey, Donald Trump's coming over here, and we're going to get an interview in a few minutes. If you want to, you can just hang out and interview him afterwards. He laughed at me and said, he's a very smart guy and a good guy. He said, Steve, my editor would fire me if he knew I even thought of interviewing Donald Trump. And I said, did you not see that speech? He says, it doesn't matter. The guy's a clown. It's just not going to happen. This is just all a circus, right? Also with the TV guys that day, I don't think he had one TV interview here. They weren't interested. He wasn't considered real. And here's what I noticed. They hadn't really listened to what he had to say, but more importantly, they had absolutely no interest whatsoever in watching the audience. That was the key. It was a collection of hobbits. It was a collection of the deplorables. It was the backbone of this country. The folks that coach our little leagues and keep our churches going, keep our civic society. It's not the big shots, right? They had actually zero interest in seeing how they responded. It was right then I knew that Trump could run the whole table, right? He talked in a different way. Republicans had lost something. The Republican establishment still lost something.
Yeah.
That something is that over the last, since post-World War II, we have this thing called the rules-based international liberal order, right? It's a series of commercial relationships and trade deals and capital markets, underwritten by the United States of America, underwritten by its taxpayers, more importantly, underwritten by its young men and women. All you veterans out there from the Cold War, Korea, Vietnam, my daughter is a West Point grad, fought with the 101st Airborne in Iraq, right? It's that generation that's been out there. What was the report today? $5.6 trillion from the Watson Institute. Now, it's at Brown University. I understand Brown, but it's a pretty respectable report. You look at the analysis, $5.6 trillion. Okay? What is it, 12, 15,000 dead? 40,000 wounded? Net present value of another $1 trillion of health and medical? And those jobs, it underwrites trade deals around the world were upside down. $400 billion in China, $70 billion in Korea, $50 billion in Japan, $100 billion in the EU. Totally upside down in the Gulf. Yet, the taxpayers of this country, the little guy, bears the burden. It's his sons and daughters that are on those ships, on those air bases. That's blood's on those battlefields. Right? And they've watched this country be hollowed out. They've watched New Hampshire be hollowed out. In Michigan, Macomb County. And they're mad. They're angry. And if they're not angry, they'd be idiots, because you should be angry. The country's been gut. This is not the second law of thermodynamics. This is not some immutable law of physics that took these jobs to Asia. This is the actions of human beings. This is human agency that did this. And this is what Donald Trump, who's been talking about this for 35 years, was able to explain against the opposition media and all the pundits on Morning Joe and MSNBC and CNN every night of the week. They're so brilliant. They're so smart. These people sat around and watched this country get gutted and said nothing about it. When I took over, Corey does not get the credit. I don't want to say the respect. He gets a lot of respect, but he doesn't get the credit of what he did. It was basically a bare bones operation. They cut through the finest generation of politicians the Republican Party has ever created. Right? You look at the caliber of candidates and look at the breadth of their experience. Governor Christie, Governor Bush, Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, right? You had the whole crew up there with 16. They were fantastic. And in any normal year, in any normal time, they would have won. Now, I respect those individuals, but I got to tell you, not one of them could have taken on the Clinton apparatus. That's a killing machine, okay? They're out to destroy you.
Literally.
Yeah. How many people have died? Yep.
After Corey ran from the day he took over here, and by the way, that's when I met him here, right? And I introduced by Dave Bossie, and those are two tough hombres. And when I heard later on David recommended that Corey run the campaign, I said, Trump's getting serious, because Corey, I don't know him too well, but I like the cut of his jib. I like the way this guy stands up. And he won't back down to Trump. He'll tell him what he needs to know at the time he needs to know it. But he's smart enough to know, let Trump be Trump. In the interregnum that followed Corey, the geniuses, right? The president had gone from running a great, primary campaign and doing a great job at the convention. I thought his convention acceptance speech, I call it the 95 Thesis. It was given like a Gatling gun, right? And here's what I loved about it. It was so brutal and so in your face. I'm sitting there watching the thing, and the CNN guys afterwards, the geniuses of CNN and MSNBC, literally are sitting there going, it's the worst acceptance speech in the history of the universe. There's no glory in America. There's no mourning here. There's nothing. It was a 95 Thesis like Luther. It was nailed on the wall, right? And then CNN cuts to a focus group. And I think it was like 80% of the people go, we loved it. It's the first guy that, they shut down that focus group. Anderson Cooper and Don Lemon, Lord, they didn't know what to do. But because of certain situations, in the Khan situation and other things, on August 13th, he was down, I think Corey said 16 points, 12 points, depending on what poll you looked at, double digits down in basically every state he had to win. Out of money, not a lot of organization. I got asked by some people to talk to Mr. Trump that night and came on as a CEO. I said, first thing we got to do is put Kellyanne as from one of your pollsters to be campaign manager and get her out. Yeah, she's another tough hombre. We put Kellyanne on TV every day for 4 weeks, and she just took incoming every day. It was just brutal, right? But we cut the campaign into 3 pieces. It was, the first is that we had to get 7 weeks to get to the first debate. And I said, hey, we're going to set the predicate. Well, all we're going to do, because all the underlying numbers are with us, I said, forget all the polls, they don't matter, right? Here's what matters. 2/3 of the American people, it's a 2/3, 1/3. 2/3 think we're on the wrong track. 75% of the country thinks we're in decline, right? Said, all we have to do is very simple. We have to make her the tribune, the defender of the status quo, of a corrupt and incompetent elite, right? That's led the country there.
Yeah.
They voted for Obama for change, and they didn't get the change they really wanted. It was all happy talk change, right? You're going to be the agent of change, and all we have to do is give people permission to vote for you. And there'll be 3 broad themes and 3 verticals. Number 1, we're going to stop mass illegal immigration. We're going to put a real rethink on legal immigration until kids in this country start to get the jobs and the careers they need. And in that, we'll take back our sovereignty. Number 2, you're going to bring back the manufacturing jobs to the United States of America. And particularly, we're going to bring them back from China and Mexico, but you'll find out in the NAFTA negotiations, that's really China gaming the system once again. Right? And number 3, we're going to finally bring an end to and get out of these now pointless foreign wars. On the morning of the first debate, September 29th, Donald Trump, they had on Morning Joe, my favorite show. Joe and Mika, you don't light me up enough. Can you just do it more often? They had the pollster that does the polls in Iowa. She's the pollster for Bloomberg. Fantastic pollster. I think we were up 2 points, right? We closed the gap to be within the margin of error. During the debates, I knew the debates were going to be tough. I said, we'll call a lot of audibles. But then when the debates end, it's a 3.5 week sprint. And we're going to do 5, 6, 7 big rallies a day. That's what Trump's best. He's like William Jennings Bryan. Remember, this guy's 70 years old, right? Doing one of these talks, Corey can tell you, folks here that do this, Governor Sununu can tell you, when you're doing a talk, you feel drained at the end of it. He's doing 6, 7 a day in front of 15, 20, 25,000 people, each one an hour long. It's physically, to sit there and watch it is absolutely incredible. And he connects with each audience. It's like watching William Jennings Bryan. I said we'd have a 3.5 week sprint and we'll just close it right there. Now, at that second debate, on the afternoon, they dropped the Billy Bush tape, right? And I told President Trump on August 13th when I took the job, I said, he said, because Trump's he's a percentage player, right? He wants to know what the odds are. Percentage player. He said, what are my odds? I said 100%. He goes, no, knock it off. What is it? I said, it's 100%. 100% metaphysical certitude, right? You stick to the plan, and we compare and contrast her. There's no doubt. They'll back you as the agent of change. All we have to do is give them permission to vote for you. On Billy Bush Saturday, by the way, Bill, on Saturday afternoon, on Friday afternoon when this dropped, and I had a talk with one of the editors of the Washington Post that, I said, well, let me see this thing, let me listen to it and verify the audio, and, we'll get back to you next week. He goes, okay, shipmate, it's coming out in about 3 minutes, and I think you can see the audio matches with the video. So, but it's interesting. The Bezos, Amazon, Washington Post that dropped that dime on Donald Trump is the same Bezos, Amazon, Washington Post that dropped the dime this afternoon on Judge Roy Moore. Now, is that a coincidence? Nope. That's what I mean when I say opposition party, right? It's purely part of the apparatus of the Democratic Party. They don't make any bones about it. By the way, I don't mind it. I'll call them out every day. It's not a fair and free media anymore. I run Breitbart. We're kind of an advocacy group in our own way, and the way that we present grassroots and present working class people and economic nationalism, we're not shy about it. Guys come to me for jobs and they say, I'm not looking to hire people who want to win Pulitzers. I'm looking for people who want to be Pulitzer, right? So I don't mind it, but I think it's a strange coincidence. But on Billy Bush Saturday, we got kind of the high command and a war council, and everybody went around the room, and Trump, once again, is asking for percentages. I think the highest percentage was 40%, right? And they were telling some guys go on 60 Minutes and cry on Ivanka's shoulder, and other people, do this and do that and apologize and apologize and apologize. He came to me and said, what? I said, what's the chance? What's the percentage? I said 100%. He goes, don't give me the high. I said 100%. And he said, I don't want to hear it now. I mean, he really blew up. He was not happy. And I said, no, I mean it, right? They don't care about this. They don't care about locker room talk. Nope. They care about their country, right? Yep. I said, we double down now, right? You're Donald Trump and they're not, right? I said, what did you do? I said, let's go have a rally, right? Let's get 1,000 hammerheads in red ball caps, right? And get all jacked up. And that's what this campaign's all about. You know what Trump did? We came down, we kind of compromised, he was going to do something, and then he read some stuff, said, I'm not going to do this. You heard the cheering from down the street. I think there were like 25,000 people on Fifth Avenue. And he went down. Secret Service said no. And he went down. And he went out there, and he was with his people. He was totally pumped up. I'd never worked in a campaign, never been in a campaign office, and never done anything on a campaign before I took over CEO. One thing I learned is not just strategy and tactics. You got to get all the pieces together. You got to make all this work. But campaigns are like war. It comes down to a handful of decisions, 2 or 3 decisions, that at that time, in the moment, in the heat of the moment, one decision is going to lead to victory and another is going to lead to defeat, right? That was the moment right there, the Billy Bush weekend. If he'd gone the other direction, he lost by 25 points, but he didn't. And then he closed, and he closed hard. We could feel the momentum every day. On the campaign, we had to win, as I broke it out, we had to win Florida, North Carolina, Ohio, and Iowa just to get to the table. Yeah. And they looked insurmountable. We had to win those 4. Those 4 gave us 2 alternatives to drive it home. Plan A was Colorado, Nevada, New Hampshire, because Corey had guaranteed me New Hampshire. Corey, my man. We won this, brother, and I'm going to prove it. I got good money to show we did win it. And all the folks out there in Maine, too. That was path 1 to get us to 270, right? But there was a plan B. And by doing demographic analysis and looking on top of this thing, early on, around Youngstown, Ohio, certain places in Ohio, Dubuque, Iowa, certain places in Iowa, we knew that this message was resonating with blue-collar folks, working-class folks, middle-class folks, and that Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan and Minnesota were coming back to us, right? That's when we knew we had something. And what we had, I think, was the greatest candidate since Ronald Reagan. right? And one of the greatest candidates in the history of the United States. You know, Donald Trump, there's a lot, and Corey knows him much better than I do. But Donald Trump's really unknown in a lot of aspects, particularly by the way mainstream media portrays him. You know, Trump is worth, I don't know, 4 billion, 5 billion, 7 billion, 8 billion. After a while, it doesn't matter, right? But he's 70 years old, got an incredible family, lovely wife, great kids that love him. The thing is the friends. If you saw the friends this guy has, it's just amazing. I mean, I keep saying he's last of kind of the Rat Pack type American male, right? A guy's guy who just attracts with his energy and charisma people. You know, he's buying great golf courses and putting them into the open rota. You know, Buck Turnberry, he was buying championship courses. Bedminster's going to be the PGA championship. At the end of his life, you know, at 70 years old, he was doing what he really wanted to do. He didn't need to do this, and I'm telling you, it was not ego. It's not narcissism. He truly believes, because we've talked, and Corey's talked, and the people around him on the inner circle know. He gave up all that because he thought his country was in a crisis, right? He got it. It is, and he knows that. If you saw the way they came after him, like they're coming after Judge Moore today, this is not, they didn't debate, you know, policy or politics. This was the politics of personal destruction, right? They never really had a debate on immigration or national security or foreign policy, the economy. It was nothing. It was attack and destroy Donald Trump.
Still is.
And you know why? It's very simple. It's not about Donald Trump. Not about Steve Bannon or Sean Hannity or Laura Ingraham or Ted Cruz or Mark Meadows. It's not about any of it. It's about those people in this room on the 12th, April 2014, right? That's where real power lies. That's why I'm a populist, right? I've had the great opportunity in my life to, you know, be a naval officer, go to Harvard, go to Georgetown, work at Goldman Sachs, be in these boardrooms and conference rooms with these great geniuses all my adult life, right? Smartest people in this country are the working class and middle class folks in this country, right? You give me the opportunity to be governed by the first 100 people that came into this room on the 12th of April, 2014, or the top 100 partners at Goldman Sachs. I'll pick those people every day of the week. We'll be more prosperous, more decent, safer, a better place and a better country, right? When Trump won, it started right away. Now he actually, you know, said it was, you know, why did everybody kind of turn? I said they didn't turn. This was the whole campaign. You just didn't see it because you were so focused on winning, that this opposition was building up the entire time. That this nullification process that has now started from the day that he won. And by the way, how did he win? You know, the first call I made when he had the strategy was to Reince Priebus at the RNC. I'd met Reince Priebus for 2 minutes in my entire life. We had a tea party thing at the Breitbart Embassy. He came over and I shook his hand. I called Reince and I said, you know, you don't know me. I said, every day in the pages of Breitbart we light you up, right? But you don't know me. We got to meet right away, and I need Katie Walsh, I need Sean Spicer to come up here immediately and join the campaign. We hired Dave Bossy, right? We made calls, all the evangelical organizations, all the Tea Party. We know we had to put together a coalition. We had to put together a coalition of the Republican establishment and this populist movement, right? The Trump movement and the establishment. It had to happen. We were never won, right? It's a combination of libertarians, limit government conservatives, neocons, right? Now there's a huge Never Trump wing out there that wasn't going to jump on board. In fact, the scariest number I think we had, Corey, was that in the generic ballot on that day, on the 13th of August, I think Reince told me later it was like at a 70. You have to be at 90 on the generic ballot to essentially win. 9 out of every 10 registered Republicans basically have to vote for you, or you're not going to be president of the United States. We were 70 because 30%, I guess, Republicans didn't think he was Republican. We had to close that, and we did it. Because we were focused on victory. We all came together. We could not have won this without the RNC and Reince Priebus, right? He was a great partner. Katie Walsh, Sean Spicer, all of them, right? Now, when we got to D.C., 2 things happened. One, it was a total nullification process. And what I mean by that is that the Democratic Party, the progressive left, and the mainstream media have been trying to nullify the election results of 2016. Okay? No, we can't let that happen. And one of the reasons we can't let it happen, we can't let it happen for them. Because if we get in this process that we're going to contest every election, and by the way, if they try to nullify this thing and keep it going, and actually they think they're going to nullify it, they got to understand, we're not going to take that line down, right?
Right.
And that's one thing this country doesn't need. We're not a banana republic, right? You know, we've been trying to export democracy all over this planet. 16 years in Afghanistan. Defense Department just put their budget out the other day, I think, in some hearing for Afghanistan. $70 billion for next year, right? Already spent $850 billion over there trying to export it. Look at the 2000, we've been doing this since what? Athens? England? Magna Carta? You know, we've been doing this a long time in the Judeo-Christian West, right? A long time. A couple of thousand years, at least a couple of half a millennia in England. And look at the 2016 presidential election, right? Look at Clinton, where she raised $2.2 billion. I think she spent, somebody told me $750 million on attack ads on Donald Trump. That's kind of what we've devolved to. It's not about issues anymore. It's about personal destruction, right? We had to put together a coalition. But that coalition is kind of frayed right now. And that's why we have to have a partners discussion about it. Okay, I'm into winning, right? Victory begets victory. If you look at what the alternative is, it's a different country than we were bequeathed. Okay, they know that and we know that. And that's what they're fighting for. And by the way, I don't hold up to their fighting. They should. That's what they believe. That's fine. It's a free country. You can believe that. I can believe this. We're going to win. Everybody in this room doesn't agree, right? There's a lot of folks in this room that thinks free trade's fine. I think it's a radical idea, and I'm a protectionist. We're going to have to work that out as partners. I'm not going to get everything I want. You're not going to get everything you want. There's some people that are interventionists, wants to be all over the globe, right? I'm not. And I consider myself a right-wing militarist. But I got to tell you, inside the White House, the West Wing, I was a dove, right? So we're not going to agree on everything, but we agree on enough of the big things that we've got to work together. Now, when I left the White House, the one thing I said, I'm going after the Republican establishment. Let me be very blunt. It's just not acceptable to me to have a man like Donald Trump who not just won the presidency, but Mitch McConnell's job is because of Donald Trump. Wisconsin, Missouri, and what was it? North Carolina. Those senators were all losing and expected to lose before Donald Trump won those states and won them as big as he did and dragged them across the finish line. I'd actually argue that a couple of three more, but I'll just take those three. That's what got Mitch McConnell his job. Donald Trump got him his job. And the deplorables in those states got Mitch McConnell the job.
Right.
Now, I take personal umbrage with the fact that we have 3 committees on Capitol Hill, right, under Republican rule, that are, and by the way, I don't, if there's, was it collusion with the Russians? You know, good luck. I was on an ASW submarine that hunted, our task back then in the Cold War was chasing Soviet submarines, right? Making sure we knew where they were. You guys in the Navy in the room know that. Went back to the Pentagon as a junior officer on the day President Reagan started, just to be one of the special assistants to an admiral, but looking at the war plans and how we're implemented. I know the Russians are bad guys. I don't need to be told that, okay? But I was also CEO of the campaign. I will respectfully submit we had a very difficult time colluding with the RNC in the state of Pennsylvania. Right? And New Hampshire was no different. But when you have a Senate Judiciary Committee and a Senate Intelligence Committee, and you got a House Intelligence Committee, and every day at the Breitbart Embassy, when somebody comes in, I said, "Hey, who's that Republican that runs that House Intelligence Committee?" And the answer is always Adam Schiff. I said, "No, that's the problem. He does in fact run it. He's a minority member. He's got on TV. He's the guy leaking everything every day. He is running it." And then on the Senate side, you got Mark Warner. Mark Warner's running for president in 2020, right? I kind of have a problem with him essentially and his staff running the Intel Committee up there with subpoena power and unlimited budget. And I've told folks it's time to bring it to a close. And by the way, I'm not sitting there saying that anything that wasn't done or be looked at. Look at all of it. But work weekends, work thing. But we're going to bring this to a close. It's not acceptable. They're playing into this whole concept of the nullification of election. Let me tell you why. In Washington, D.C., it's not what it seems. Everything you see on cable TV, and I mean virtually everything, on Fox and MSNBC, CNN, all this, it's all pro wrestling, right? It's pro wrestling. That's not the real deal. The real deal is the permanent political class. This interlocking network of donors and consultants and lobbyists and corporatists and globalists, right? 7 of the 9 richest counties in this country surround Washington, D.C. For the first time since the silicon chip was invented, the per capita income in those 7 counties is greater than Silicon Valley. And Silicon Valley has created the greatest wealth in the history of mankind. We live in a country now that has ascended economies in Silicon Valley, Wall Street, Hollywood, and Washington, D.C. And everywhere else is a descended economy. Now, how'd that happen? It happened because there's a business model of this permanent political class that accretes essentially all the value to themselves, right?
You're here.
A high school graduate has not had a raise in real dollars since 1972. Right? When they had these hurricanes a couple of weeks ago, there's a report came out, 50% of the households, I think it's what, so 60 million, 100 million households in the country means 50 or 60 million. 50 or 60 million households do not have $400 in cash to pay for an emergency. Okay? Is that the kind of country that the revolutionists fought for? Right? Was that the kind of country, Civil War?
No.
Is that the kind of country at Guadalcanal?
No.
Normandy? No.
No.
You know whose fault this is? It's our fault. We've let that happen. Right? That's all human agency. This is not the law of physics. When somebody says, oh, the jobs are just going to go to Asia. No, the jobs just did not go to Asia. Okay? It was human agency that sent those jobs to Asia. And somebody, and some groups, and some classes made an awful lot of money out of it. And they're still doing it today. And if you want to have a country that has 80% of the households with $400 in their pocket, or can't get $400 in cash in their pocket, we just got to keep down this path. That's where we are today. Now, you saw in Virginia, and the mainstream media is making some huge thing, the repudiation of Trump, but it's not the repudiation of Trump, I think it's a valuable lesson, and we've got to learn lessons. First lesson is, November 8th and 9th of last year are just days. Now, they're high holy days, and we will always celebrate them, all right? It's the MAGA days, the 8th and the 9th, and we'll always celebrate those, remember the memories and all the great things that happened. But they're just 2 days, right? If you want your country back, you got to work for it every day. Because the people trying to change the direction of this country, they're working every day. These are hard-working folks. Don't think they're not working. You saw them in Virginia. And I don't like whining, and there's a lot of whining going on. Okay? An establishment candidate, a Bush guy, right? He won a primary. The other guy came in second, came close to the Trump guy. Now, the Bush guy kind of didn't really reach out to the Trump people, and we jumped in and tried to help out and try to say, get the Trump guys fired up and said, hey, it's very important. Here's why it's important. You want to win the Senate seat, you want to take on Tim Kaine in 18, you better win this governorship in 17, right? You know, I'm not a big Ed Gillespie fan, but he's a good man, right? Maybe he didn't run a perfect campaign. But the one thing I can tell you, right, and I'm the most fire-breathing populist down there, if we don't put this coalition together, if we can't look at each other and say, hey, I understand we disagree on a lot of stuff, right? 18 is not going to be pretty. Now, it can be tremendous, right? President sticks to the plan, I'm telling you, we could pick up 3 to 5 seats in the Senate, right? And we can hold the House. And we can set the predicate for 400 electoral votes in 2020. That's all in front of us, okay? The one thing that has to happen, I think Kevin McCarthy sent it over today. I said last night, because I had Congressman Paul Mitchell was there, from Macomb County, and he said there were 180 bills that the House had passed, Senate had taken up. I know, in working at the White House, we passed through a lot of immigration stuff, a lot of bills that would be very hard votes for red state Democrats, and they just linger, right? In fact, they say my campaign against Mitch McConnell, this big effort for advantage, some guy runs his mouth and all this. Well, you know, ever since we started putting the whip hand to him, I noticed they're working 6 days a week. I noticed they passed the budget. I noticed he says he's going to cancel Thanksgiving if they got to work through it, right? I noticed he's coming out with a tax plan tomorrow. They're moving. I notice he's now starting to really push federal judges through there, right? He's working in double time. He's the only reason he's working at double time because you got to keep the hammer on these folks every day. If you don't, they're going to do what they want to do on the time frame they want to do it. And if we allow that to happen, there's not a tax. Just a tax cut's not going to save us. Okay? The focus has got to be here on winning. We know how to win. We just have to put our mind to it, have to put our differences aside and understand you're not going to get everything. I didn't get everything. None of us are. But we get enough, and it's good enough for the next day, because if you want to take this country back, it's not just 18 and 24. It's going to be 22 and 20. It's going to be 22, 24. Just on and on and on and on. I'd love to be able to have a magic wand or pat you on the head and tell you all's going to be good. It's not. Okay? And you folks know it. You guys in the legislature, you know the nuts and bolts that have to be done. This is grassroots dinner. This is the reason I came here. That's what wins in a digital age. The analog's more important. What's going to win is very simple. Authentic candidates like Donald Trump, big actionable ideas like build the wall, right? Drain the swamp. And then grassroots, using digital technology to go door to door. In this era, it's not commercials. Commercials are a waste of money. That's why the system down there all wants to raise this money and spend it on commercials. They don't work. It's a compensation system. They're skimming 20% off the top from the donors, who I now think are wising up to this, right? Because the best thing is somebody going door to door. It's the way Obama won. You go door to door with passion, and people know in the neighborhood how you comport yourself, how you live your life. That what you say means something. That's the way you win. You ring a doorbell and tell somebody about Donald Trump. That's what the grassroots movement is. You put an army of grassroots people together, we will win election after election after election. But that's what it's going to take. We're in the great fourth turning of American history, right? These turnings happen about every 80 to 100 years. There's a bunch of books out there and a bunch of analysis, but if you drill down into it, you'll see it's a recurrent pattern. We've had it in the Revolution, in the Civil War, the Great Depression, World War II. It comes about every 80 to 100 years. Now, I don't know where this fourth turning started, whether it was 9/11 or the financial crisis in 2008. Maybe President Xi's speech the other night, his last week, he gave a 3-hour speech, 68 pages long. I recommend everybody in this room go to the internet and read it, okay? Because it's a speech that even Hitler and Mussolini and Tojo couldn't have given. It lays out pretty succinctly how the Confucian mercantilist dictatorship in China has won, at least from their perspective. They're the new hegemonic power, right? And they're going to take a lot more than our jobs in the future, because they've already taken the large majority of those. In fact, that's what connects Brexit. Everybody says Brexit in 2016. Well, we saw Brexit. We started Breitbart London, in 2013, because we knew England was going to be a canary in the mine shaft to this populist movement in the United States. But why is Brexit in 2016? They're connected because of China. China, they're exporting their deflation and exporting their excess capacity that gutted the Midlands industrial base of England, and it gutted the upper Midwest of the United States. And it's those voters in England and the United States that have voted to get out of. It's the labor voters and the working class conservative voters that voted to get out of the EU, and the working class and middle class in this country that voted Donald J. Trump. Fourth turnings take anywhere from 20 to 25, 30 years to go through, right? I can tell you one thing, at the end of this one, the next 15 or 20 years, we're going to be one of two things. We're either going to be the country that was bequeathed to us, or we're going to be something radically different, okay? It's just not economics, just not they think they're socialists. Look at the cultural. Look at where they want to go. Look what they did to the monuments. I'm from the South. I'm not talking Lee and Jackson. Look what they did up in New York City to Teddy Roosevelt, to Columbus. Okay? That's what's coming. And the only way to stop it is you folks in this room. It's not Donald Trump, it's not Steve Bannon, it's not Laura Ingraham or Mark Meadows. It's going to be you. It's the responsibilities on your shoulders, right? Now, when I think about what teams you could select or what teams you could pick, I couldn't think of a better team, right? I'll take you guys any day of the week. But we got to get serious about this, go serious business. We got to start conducting ourselves like a great power. We can't have the nonsense, the happy talk, the misdirection plays. We need to have folks like you hold these people accountable every day of the week. The beginning step of that was the Trump Revolution on November 8th and 9th of 2016. We celebrate the first anniversary of this tonight. Let's hope that those little kids, when you go home tonight, your grandkids, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, 9 years, 10 years old, when they hold this dinner 40 years from now, we've done our duty. Thank you very much.